Welcome! A couple of days ago, I was throwing some big bowls, shallow bowls with reclaimed clay. And as I explained in that video, it's not always easy because the clay is less consistent and therefore also more likely to flop or not turn out exactly how you want. But as also explained, I can fix most of it in trimming. So today I will trim these big bowls and show you how something that didn't turn out perfect can actually turn out really well. Anyway, so let's go ahead. As you can probably see, there's a bit of a bulb here. I already started trimming a little bit, but I want a continuous flow inside a bowl like this. It is more like a platter than a bowl, but anyway. The reason I got this bulb was, well, two reasons. I'm not as good as I would like to be. The other reason is that because it was more inconsistent, when I made it this wide, which is something that often happens, it started to flop. So because I'm trying to defy gravity here because I'm throwing very wide, and then it kind of flops down, and that creates this bulb. Fortunately enough, there's plenty of clay. So what I can do is I can remove some of this clay and then smooth out the curve of the bowl. So I'm going to start with that. And to begin with, I'm just really trying to get as much of that clay away, so we don't have that bulb anymore. And it's easy enough now to just remove. So I'm trying not to go too fast. And of course, it's important that you do this on the right stage. It's a little bit on the wet side, but basically you want something that is stable. This is stable, and you're not sticking. So when you put your fingers on, it's not sticking. On the other hand, you still want it as wet as it is here now, so you can actually trim in it. If it's too dry, then you're sort of just scraping off clay, and that makes it much more difficult. So it's very, very important that you have the right stage to do it on. You see, already now we're getting a more consistent flow. Of course, it doesn't look so good now. Don't worry about that. We can clean that up later. So a little bit too much here. See, now it's getting much, much better. And something that initially turned out a failure is now turning out a really nice pot. So still a little bit here. Down here it's beginning to look good, so just going to start up from here now. I'm just gonna check how thick it is, and right here, so right here, it's the thinnest part. So I have to be careful not to take too much. When we get further down, there's still something to take. Up here, it's thicker, but I do like to keep a thick rim. So I think on this part, I'm gonna take a little bit more. And as always, when you're trimming, the hard part is to make sure that you're in control. So hold it as long out here as possible. If you hold it like this, it's going to flop around and clay is going to take control. You want to take control of it. And it's a little more difficult with these white bowls because normally I would lean on something, but I need to get in over the edge of it. So this is a little more tricky. So you see, it's actually turning out really, really nice now. Still a little bit too much up here. So, and again, at this stage, I'm not so concerned with any trimming lines. I'm just trying to get the shape the way that I want it. So, it's beginning to look nice now. There's a little bit of wobbling because when it started to collapse on me, it doesn't do it evenly. But you can see now that I'm turning it around, it is, I mean, it's a little bit of wobbling, but it's very little. And once you stop the wheel, you don't actually see any of that. So it's nothing that will disturb the visual impression of the final bowl. Let me just see here. Yeah, we still have some clay to go. So let me just see here. Yeah, I can still take a little more here. Just a little more here. See, something that was surely a failure in the way that I had this beginner's shoulder is now continuous shape. Now that it's wobbling, it's a little more tricky to get it the same size here, but if you align your hands with the rim, then it's possible to do it. And I'm removing the scraps, the ones that I can remove right now. I'm not too concerned with the little ones because I can blow dry it a little bit in the end, and then we can remove that. So what you don't want to do is try and scrape it up, because if you do that, you're just going to smudge it into the pot, and then it looks awful. I'm also going to do a little bit of work on the rim. Just smoothen it, make it a little more round. And as you can see, it is a bit wobbly out here. I don't think it's a lot, but of course it's not completely straight and round. But again, as a very experienced potter once told me, how do you get rid of the wobbling? You stop the wheel. Because nobody's going to judge your pot based on how it spins, but they're going to judge it based on how it looks when you just stand there. And I think this one qualifies. So, yeah. So now I think there's a little bit left here. So now I need to decide what to do with my throwing lines. Either I will emphasize them and make it like a texture, or I will even them out and make it smooth. If this was a sink, given the form, it could be, I would of course even out all the trimming lines because I want a smooth surface for the water to run. But this is more a decorative piece, maybe on a table with some fruits or something. So there's actually something nice to be said about having throwing lines or having some sort of texture. Because depending on the glaze, of course, but if I use a glaze, which I most often do, that breaks well, change color over different textures, it will look really good. So I will actually do two things, and I can show you both here. Give you an example. First, I will even out these throwing lines a little bit because I don't like the texture of them. So I will start with that, and then I will add some new texture. So let's try and even out the lines first. To do that, I will typically use a metal rib, very flexible and easy to use to even out throwing lines like this, or trimming lines. I basically just scrape over it, and I get this, get it even out a little bit. I think maybe I need to pull up my sleeves. The nice thing about trimming is that it's not so dirty. There's no mud involved. But still, I just need to be able to work with no interference of my clothing. So you see now, it's getting much more smooth. I don't know if you can see there, but it is. And I sort of bent it a little bit to adapt to the curve of the bowl. I'm basically just working my way up the sides and trying to even out the little bumps and trimming lines. So I think, I'm not sure, maybe, let me just feel here, I think maybe this part should be a little lower. So I will go back. Some of that you don't see before you actually smooth it out. And so, oh, that is, I dropped it on the floor. So that's another good thing about doing this. So I need to deepen this just a little bit. So I think that's better. Now, of course, I'm introducing new trimming lines, but as you just seen, it's quite easy to remove. So yeah, I think just a little bit more here. Yeah, I think that curve is better. So now, of course, I have to even out the trimming lines again. So, looks good. Yeah, now you can sort of feel the curve. Sometimes it's difficult to see the curve, but this looks good. So now we have a nice, smooth curve. And yeah, I think I like this. So now I could leave it like this. I could apply some slip, and I could add some throwing lines back into it. And I think what I'm going to start with is the very inside. I just want that very smooth, and to do that, I take this super flexible rubber rib. I'm just going to burnish this. Sometimes it's difficult with the very center of it, but yeah. So now I have a very smooth center, and I'm thinking that I may want to add some texture to it. So I think I'm going to start around here and slowly work my way out. So now we've introduced some lines again, and I think I like that. It's not too much. It's just gonna give the glaze something to play around. Now's a good time to show you this trick with the blower, because if I blow now, these little crumbles are gonna dry very quickly, and then you can easily wipe them away. What I want to be careful about is not push it into the clay. I think basically they're dry enough now. I think I actually accidentally pushed some of them a little bit into the clay. If that happens, you can use your throwing the rib here, the missile rib, and just loosen them. Now, without destroying your newly acquired trimming lines. Sometimes you can use a brush to gently get rid of them. That doesn't smudge as much as if you're using your fingers. So, there's a couple there. Now we got rid of all the little trimmings, and I'm just gonna make sure that the smooth part in the middle is completely smooth. That's gonna be sort of a contrast to the trimming lines up on the sides. So, all in all, I think the inside looks nice now. Now it's time to do the outside, but I will have to cut it 3. So let me just get my wire. And it can be a little bit tricky when it's a white bowl, but it's important, of course, to hold it flat down and that's it. Now you'll be able to remove it. It's still a little bit on the soft side, so I'm going to leave it on the bed for now and put it to dry a little bit more. And now it's time to trim the other one. As you remember, I did 2 of the reclaimed clay bowls. This one is not as white. That was the one I made with very, very dry clay, and it survived, which is sort of amazing in its own way. So now I'm going to trim that. It's not as thick as the other one, but there's some bumps around, so I want to even that out a bit. And again, to begin with, I'm not concerned about any throwing lines or anything. I'm just trying to even out where there's a few bumps left. Considering the fact that this was thrown on clay that was way too dry, I'm actually sort of not displeased with the result. It's actually quite decent. So this is a lot easier than the other one because it's still got a little bit of a bump in the middle here, but not much. Yeah, it actually looks really good. And unlike the other one, I like the throwing lines that I get from this trimming tool. And that's sort of funny because even though I'm using the same trimming tool, the trimming lines are not always the same. I guess it also depends on the state of the clay. And so don't just expect that what you get from one tool is always the same. In this case, it's obviously not. This actually looks really nice, and it's surprisingly thin and not very wobbly. Depending on the state, this is on the dry side. You can use a shiny stone to just smoothen up the edge. I usually just use it on the edge and just push down the grog into the clay. As you can see, it is a little bit wobbly, but it doesn't, and I mean, it's mostly that way. So when you look at it standing still, I think it's actually very decent. So I think I'm happy with this. And the rough throwing lines here, I think the glaze I'm thinking about for this one will look great. Now let's see if we can clean up the inside so I can smoothen that lower part. It will require me to do a little bit of blowing. In the lower part here, we definitely need to do a little bit of work. So I'm gonna use, again, the metal whip, the flexible whip. I'm just gonna smoothen it in here. I like this contrast you get from having a textured side, and then in the very middle, you let it go completely smooth. So something like that. And again, I'll just use the soft whip. So I think this is good. And as you can see, this one have traces of the clay not being mixed well enough, someone would say, but I just like the different colors it's gonna give me. So I actually like that. It's gonna help create a more variation in the final color when we glaze it. So again, this one needs to be cut like this. This one is a little more stiff. So this one can be turned, and it's actually surprisingly light. So to turn this and to trim it on this wheel, we need to remove the splash pans. because you can see in a second here, but the pot is obviously too wide to be on my wheel head. So to compensate for that, I have some wider bats. I made these ones. They are 50 centimeter wide, so I can make very wide bowls. So I put this on top of it, and I try to see that it's almost, like from equal distance from all the sides. So now comes the tricky part, because I have to turn it around, and I'm holding on below it, holding on the top. And then in my experience, if I turn it up and turn it, then there will be no pressure. If I turn it slowly, it will glide out of my hands. So I need to turn it in like one go, like this. Whoop. See, that went well. And now I can remove this bat. And the tricky part here is, besides dealing with a bat this size, I'm going to try and put it approximately in the middle. The tricky part here is, of course, to position the pinholes over the pins, because I can't see them. So there's two ways to do that. I can move this a little bit that way. It should work for this pot. So this makes it much easier, because now I can see the hole. And once I have one hole, it's a lot easier to add the other one. I'm just going to move this. Because I can actually grab onto this and move it, I could do this this sort of trick. But yeah, it seems to turn okay. Now it's time to center it. I never got around to learn proper tap centering, but I would also say with a big bowl like this, it's tricky. So I'm just using the old school, moving it a little bit, measuring again. And I think it looks okay now. Of course, because it's a little bit wobbly, I need to decide which part I want centered, because all of it is not going to be centered in this case, but I think this is good enough. Just gonna do a really quick trim to get this slurry part off. I'm gonna get back to you on how to make the foot more precise. But for now, I'm just gonna do some basic trimming here. And now this is a relatively thick bowl of walls, so it's not so dangerous to trim, but still I usually try and see if I can get my tools to cut through the clay instead of pushing into the clay, because the thinner the walls of the bowl gets, the more fragile, of course, it gets. So if I push too much with my tools, I'm going to push through and I'm going to break the wall. So I'm trying to avoid that. One good thing about the big bowls is that if it was a small bowl, I would need to secure it with some lumps of clay. But for a bowl this size, I don't need that. Yeah, now I need the lower part here. It's a little bit of a lump here that I want to try and even out. So that's much better. Yeah, and again, I'm not trying to make it smooth. I like the trimming texture I get, because for the glazes I'm going to use, that's going to look great. But again, it depends on what glazes you use. Now, because it's not completely centered, we need to cut the foot to be. But before I do that, I'm just going to smoothen the top so it's flat, like this. And then I'm going to mark up where my outer part of it should be. So now this is centered. So now I just need to remove the clay that's outside of this. And I can't hold on to the pot or anything because that's a bit wobbly. So I need to secure my arms the best that I can. So now we have a circular foot, which we need to do a foot rim. So I'm just making sure that it's even and sharp here. Now we can mark the inner part of the foot. And that should be then circular, so it will be the same width all the way around. I'm gonna make sort of a fat or a wide foot because it is a big ball. I don't want it to be too small. Now I marked where I want it, and now I can verify that it's the same width all the way around. Let me move the camera a little bit closer. And that I always like to do. I mean, you can trim a foot in different ways, but by marking this the foot, I have a guide for how much clay to remove. So now I'm going from the inner part, and that's the most tricky part, and you really, really need to hold on to your trimming tool because the clay wants to take control, and you don't want that. To begin with, I'm not taking off that much, and I'm just using the corner of my trimming tool not to get too grabbed onto the clay. So this way, I'm going to take slices of clay away. And of course, at this point, you may think, how can I know how much to take? It depends on how thick you make the button. This one is about 1.5 centimeters, so I can at least take maybe 0.5 centimeter, 1 centimeter maybe. But you can also tap it. This have a very high pitch sound. The deeper it gets, the thinner it is. And even for the foot, there's a question of aesthetics. I like the foot to sort of continue the shape you have on the side. So a little bit deeper here than in the middle. So not completely the same shape, but sort of have that round feel to it. It's a matter of taste, of course. But something like that. Just gonna it's still sort of high pitched, but I don't want the button to be too thin. So I take a little bit more, but I don't want to take away too much because it is a big bowl and I don't want it to be super thin. So I'm just going to use this flat one to flatten out the inside. I'm just going to smooth it with a finger. I like this to be, that's a design question, I like this to be a little bit smoother than the inside and the outside of the bowl. I always sort of round these a little bit. If they're too sharp, it can look really, really nice. But they're more, there's a bigger risk that they will chip off. And also I'm gonna just cut off a small bevel here, which is gonna make the bowl look like it's sort of floating a little bit more. And again, just rounding it off. The only thing left for this one is to leave my maker's mark And I know that I mentioned this more than a few times. I got these wonderful ones made by a company in Ukraine, and it's stainless steel, and I've been so happy about them. They are strong and nice. I think it's going to last us forever. I will put a link to where you can buy them. And they were actually surprisingly cheap. And for me, being here in Denmark, they actually shipped for free. So it was very affordable. About the same price as I used to pay for wooden ones. And they don't last forever. These ones do. And they can make it very thin, very deep. It's a very good stamp. So anyway, gonna stamp it inside. That's it. And now it's done. Before I turn it around, because I trimmed off some of the foot here, it's a little soft. So I just want to blow dry it a little bit. Because when I turn it around, if this is a little bit soft, there's a risk that it will leave marks when I turn it around. Yeah. I think this is actually enough. I will also just burnish it a little bit with my shiny stone. So I'm going to turn it around on a bed that can soak in some of this remaining moist in the foot. I'm going to do it on this one. So try and put it just around the center. And I'm going to do the same thing, just the opposite way. 1, 2, 3. So this is where you're testing the foot. If the foot was too narrow, too thin, I had issues where when I put it here, it broke through and it couldn't hold itself on the foot, but this is good. I'm going to put this to dry. That's it for today. I trimmed these 2 reclaimed bowls, white bowls, and I hope you learned a little bit from it. I do really enjoy trimming, and I think they turned out really good, despite the fact that it was a special challenge with this clay. If you do like this video, if you want to see more, please subscribe. You're welcome to write a comment, good or bad, if you have good suggestions. Maybe you think I did something wrong and you want to suggest a better way. That's perfectly welcome. Share whatever you like. And I will have a new video coming up next week, Sunday, usual time, about 5 p.m.-ish, Central European time. So just hope to see you again, and have a great day.